and welcome to the Natural Healing Reel. I'm Jacqueline Capstick, and today my guest is Elizabeth Jacks Scott. Reverend Betsy, how are you today?
I am so happy, Jacqueline, to be here on your show and to talk about my natural healing journey. And I think it's wonderful that you are having guests and talking about so many people's journeys. I think that's what we all are called to do.
I think you're right. We all have a story and we all have something to share, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you start with giving us a little bit of background about where you've been. How's your journey started, and where did you really kind of come into this whole Reverend Betsy and writing books and coaching people? And I mean, you're like a multi-talented wonder. So share with us how this all come about.
I could say I've been a searcher all my life, but I think the real searching came when I was 43 and suddenly my husband was killed in an automobile crash. And I had two young children at the time, 11 and 14. And I just had no idea. I'd really been a person who was always interested in the scriptures, and I lived the life of a sort of a traditional wife and mother, and I understood that life. But then suddenly to be alone, my mother had died with these two young children, a single woman in this world. I didn't really not know what to do. So I went to seminary because I needed to know what God had to say to a single woman. I knew what he had to say to me as a wife. But I didn't know what he had to say to me as a single woman. And I remember at the time I met Cardinal Koenig, and I told him that. And he said to me, "My dear, that is your mission. You need to find that out." And so I started in seminary, and what I learned was that I was called not to be good, but to be loving. And good is like I'm following everybody else and obeying and doing everything I should do, hoping for everybody to say, "Oh, you're wonderful," or whatever they're going to say.
Right. That's huge. What you just said there is huge. We're all doing that, trying to get that seeking self-approval so we are comfortable in an uncomfortable space.
Right. But actually, what I learned after 3 years of full-time study at Union Theological Seminary was that we're called, that good is sort of a passive, I'm looking for other person to approve of me. Loving is actually an active verb coming out of yourself. It's like love, the definition I learned in seminary, love is a presence, love is an affirmation and a union. And what they meant was that you had so in touch with your own self that you had space within your soul to actually be present with another, to see who they are, to be there in what they're going through, because you found space in you've been through what you've been through, and you now have room to see them. And an affirmation means that you actually can, what we call, mirror back to them. You can say, "Oh, I see you're sad. I see you're happy. I see what you're going through." They're seen. So they're not alone, and they're seen. And then a union is where you look into your own self and you recognize your own emotions. And then out of that, you can really feel another's joy or sadness or whatever they're going through. And it's a real sense of intimacy. And so that was a huge learning coming out of there. And then I went into social work school because I wanted to share what I've learned with others. And eventually I remarried after about 7.5 years. And I found that actually a big, huge thing to enter a step family. And how are you going to get along with all these new people and new families? And that was another mountain I had to climb. And I realized that I still hadn't really dealt with me, even though I had dealt with my grief through seminary. I'd never gone back and said, who how do I really feel? Who are you? And so that was a very long journey. And I find that if you seek, you find. If you knock on the door, it's open unto you. That I became a true seeker for my path, for my mission, for who I am. And I was responded to. And I had these wonderful spiritual, mystical experiences that transformed my life. And I was so overjoyed by all the things I discovered. I had to write about it. I couldn't resist
Really?
that, sitting down and telling the world, this is what I found, and you can find it too, because I'm just a human seeker like everybody else. And my children have responded to me. I didn't know this, but my children for a while found me very difficult, which was a big shock. And then when I went through all of this and felt all my emotions, my daughter suddenly said to me, "Mother, you're a presence in my life of unconditional love. And we want you around." And I thought, wow.
Wow.
But that taught me that the more we tune into our, like if you have an emotion, if you're suddenly angry, the best thing to do is sit down in a chair and feel it. Because if you feel an emotion, it will dissipate, it'll go away. But if you don't feel it, it gets worse and it festers inside you and it comes out in funny ways. So I mean, no one's journey is over. I can't claim my journey is over, but at least I do know now that when I get something makes me angry, to sit down and not do anything. Don't act it out. Don't say anything you don't want to say. Just feel it. And then you begin to be able to speak in a different way.
So you have really touched on some really like very core ingredients to the path to having happiness and joy and love and all of those things. And it's so simple. Like I'm listening to it, it kind of just, you just skate over it. But you just have to go within and actually spend some time with yourself. Let yourself love yourself a little, fill your cup up so that then you can be there, have a space for other people. Like so huge. So
it's taken me a lifetime to learn that.
Yeah.
And,
me too. Yeah, me too.
but the abundance that comes from this is so rewarding that it's worth all the struggle to get there. And people, and so you no longer, I'm really very interested now in parenting, and I coach people in parenting now, and it's all now, it's not child-centric, it's parent-centric. So it's not about changing that child's behavior. It's about you, the parent, monitoring your temperature. I mean, your emotional temperature. Are you calm and are you at peace? Are you happy or are you angry? Are you anxious? Are you out of control? Where are you? And learning how to monitor yourself. And when you're out of control, being transparent to your kids and say, you know what, honey, this is not a good time for me to talk to you because I'm really angry or I'm out of control. I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to sit down, or I'm going to do whatever, take a bath, or whatever it is that makes you feel better. And then we'll talk. And
so that's huge too, right there, because we're not taught that. Like generations, we're just doing the generational behavioral patterns, and we're unconscious. For myself, horrible, because my kids will be like, well, you're talking to me like this, and I'm like, I am? Like, I don't know that I'm talking like that. And then of course, my daughter will be talking to me like that, and I'm talking to me like that. Well, where did she learn it? Right. And where did I learn? Like, we're all just mimicking each other, and we're unconscious that we just think it's everybody else, and it's everybody. It's all of us. We all have to kind of jump inside and go, okay, well, that's like, and what you're saying, like that energy inside, we're so scared to feel that. We don't want to feel that. We think it's bad. It's not bad. It's just an energy. It's just a little bit denser and more uncomfortable than the other ones, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was one of the things I learned that I was so afraid of my emotions. I thought, oh my goodness, I really feel, whatever I did, don't like whatever I actually felt. And I learned that emotions are not good or bad. They just are. That's who you
Just
are.
is that what they say? They go, just is. I love that.
And it's who you are at that moment. It's how your self is reacting to whatever's in your environment or in yourself at the moment. And the only good or bad is the actions you take based on those emotions. So you can be, so being angry is not bad or good. It's just you're angry, okay. But then what do you do about it? If you then sit and yell at whoever's in your life because you're angry, so you're going to take it out on them, well, that's a terrible idea. But if you say, I'm angry, I think I better take a walk and I better sit on a park bench and think about why I'm angry and what I'm going to do about it, and let my system begin to calm down and get reasonable and rational and find space in my head. And then maybe I can have a talk with whoever it is who made me angry, and we can, work it out together. But so that's the new parenting model is teaching the parent.
I am going to be excited about the day when we all grasp onto that, because everybody's trying to change and mold their children into what the box is for society, right? For them to be the A student, the athlete, the this, the everything. So the parents are shining. Like it's so self-fulfilling prophecy for a lot. I think that there's some awareness coming into it now that it's kind of, people are starting to get into more self-love and self-awareness, and know that they're teaching us how to behave.
I think, right. And I think there's a lot of, there's only one truth, but there are many ways of coming at it. And science is spending a lot of time now studying the brain and studying human development. And that's also part of this new paradigm that really, if you listen to the children, like if they're angry, instead of saying, don't be angry, but instead say, oh, honey, why are you angry? Let me hear and come over here, I'll give you a hug or whatever is appropriate. That helps develop their ability to cope with their emotions. It helps their brains to begin and develop the connection between the thought and the emotion. And so this new parenting model is very aware that what you're really trying to do is help these children develop the capacities in their brain to make decisions, to understand themselves, to deal with their own emotions. So again, children having emotions isn't bad. That's good. They need to have emotions. You need to let them have their emotions, but you need to be there so it isn't so scary for them. Hold their hand if it's appropriate, soothe them, see them, just be there until they begin slowly to deal with their own emotion.
And I believe that we make ourselves wrong right away if we're not feeling happy, in the flow, in sync with everything. We're then, well, yesterday I felt really good, now what's wrong? Now I'm back. And so we beat ourselves up or shame ourselves about falling back into a pattern when we've already worked through that. Now I'm back here again because I got triggered from that again. And so it's this, we're so darn hard on ourselves. Like we're just not nice to ourselves at all. And then we're wondering why other people aren't loving us because we're not loving ourselves, right?
Right. But the emotions that in the amalgam, the back of our heads, which we are most vulnerable when we're children, are so tenacious and so strong and so powerful. It can be so overwhelming that even though you've dealt with this emotion over and over, then it comes back again.
Oh gosh, I'm so stuck in that. I'm so going through with kids and separation and stuff, and I keep going back and it's like, oh, I've got this. It doesn't. It's you understand now, but that pattern runs so deep that your body's going before you've even responded or thought about how you're going to respond. Right? It's like you're walking around in like a zombie. It's like, oh, just total reaction of, I don't know. But it's great that we're having this conversation because clearly there's some awareness arising for us, right?
That's right. But in seminary, I always go back to seminary because they taught me so much. This wonderful teacher, Anne Ulanoff, great professor of psychology and religion, she used to say that our emotions, because we're finite creatures, our emotions are finite. So they're not infinite. And she used to say that they were like compared to a volleyball that you try to hold under the water. If you do that, it's going to pop up in strange ways. But if you let it up out, on the water, it's not so powerful anymore. Or she used to talk about the same thing like a tea kettle.
Yes, I've heard that analogy. Isn't that, I love that. Sorry, I had to interrupt, but I have little ones still. I've got a 4-year-old and some teenagers, and so we just let them sometimes just let it go, and don't make her right or wrong, but just let that steam come off. Where before I was always trying to shut it down.
I think it's better to let it in a safe way, in a place they're not hurting themselves or anybody else.
Yes.
To let it out. That's right. And then you can begin to think, well, what was that emotion telling me? What was it? What's the message? What's the meaning? What's the image? What do I have to do differently? It begins to speak to you and change. I agree with that. And I think also for me, I've learned that besides trying to deal with my emotions, quiet is so important to me in my life now. I spent every morning, I actually lay down on my living room floor and I stretch a little bit to make my body feel better. And then I just lay there for a few minutes and I just find it so refreshing to let the mind clear and see what new thoughts come in. And after this, I always feel transformed. I just have a new sense that I can handle the day, that it's okay.
It's so important. I have understood this for most of my life, and I'm still working on that, setting that intention in the morning and having that connection, but making that my main focus. And so, I don't know that. First of all, I don't think any of us get a free pass on that. So I think everybody has to do this work. I think some people come in and they're a little more in tune than.
Well, I do say that the way we were, it's not to blame a parent, it's just to say that a lot of work is now being done on attachment theory and of when you're a child. Yeah. And if you are lucky enough, and also if you as a mother were able to let your children be seen and soothed and safe and secure, then it's an easier process for them than if you were in a family where you were not given everything you need as a mother. But of course, there are no perfect mothers. So we all have some struggles we have to do, but certainly there are very different degrees of them. I personally was what we call today is a pleaser, because I had a mother and father who were quite controlling and quite critical, and I've spent a lot of time in this book of mine just trying to figure out why they were that way. But because they were, then I turned against myself and I said, well, it's my fault that they're critical, and
that's the message we
I'm
give.
going to study them to see what they wanted me to do so I could get the love I so wanted. But that's not a good way to live. That's what I learned, that you've got to do just the opposite. You have to go into yourself and listen to yourself and know yourself. And out of that is where you learn to love and live. It's quite a transformation, but so worth making it.
And so what advice do you give people so they're at home and they're done the COVID and they're, maybe still feeling a little blue and not really having their life fully back on track? How does somebody that's listening to you or doesn't have your book yet to kind of see the process, what how do you tell them to do that? Do you tell them to lay on their floor or lay somewhere like what you're suggesting? Or like, what's some of the secret ingredients that you,
I do think that being quiet and listening, so it's like prayer is if when you sit quietly and whatever's in your head, I got to make these phone calls, whatever it is, sort of put them in a box on a shelf. And then the next set of thoughts that come to you about whatever you have to pay your bill, whatever it is, put them in a box on a shelf until you finally get your mind clear and you get to a space inside yourself that's empty. And then it takes a little courage, sit with that emptiness and see what new thoughts come in at that point. And those new thoughts will be of a deeper level, perhaps from yourself, from the spirit, giving you a newer perspective, a broader perspective, a greater vision than you were aware of before you started this. So I certainly think meditation is a wonderful way. I also think that sitting down with yourself and saying, what is important for me to do? Or what do I love doing? Do I love music? Do I love to paint? Do I love to walk? Do I love flowers? Do I love, going to movies? Whatever it is that you love, begin to acknowledge that this is what I love and this is what I like to do, and begin to do those things one way or another. And as you do it, you'll find yourself being filled up with whatever it is, the beauty of the art, the music, the nature, and you'll find your spirit calming down. And as your spirit calms down and you fill yourself with beauty or with whatever it is you like, you'll find that you have more room in yourself when you meet your neighbor or when you decide to call your child, whoever it is in your life. You'll be more willing to listen to them. And it's our sharing of our stories and sharing of ourselves that brings us a sense of connection, that we're no longer alone, that we have a community, we know each other. So it is a process. And of course, I used in my life a lot of professionals. As I say, I studied theology. I found that a wonderful source to help me. I also, because I need a lot of help emotionally, went to a therapist, and they were huge. They were very, very helpful to me. And then finally, I became a therapist. So I've listened to a lot of people, but it's a process. You just have to believe that if you seek, you will find. If you keep knocking, the door will be open to you. I think you have to believe. I think that's maybe the basis. I always believed there was an answer, even though I didn't know the answer. And I decided I would seek it. And I just am so rejoiced to tell you, if you seek, you find. If you knock, the door opens unto you. And that if you really honestly seek the Holy Spirit answers you.
Yeah. I can attest to that. And I didn't grow up with any religion. And I'm not really that comfortable with the whole organized religion, because I just felt like I needed to be somebody else to be accepted. Like, it was maybe not, feels like, you need to pretend that you're somebody else so that everybody's going to accept you, because if somebody finds out that, say, you're divorced, then, you're the outcast, or whatever we're thinking in our head, that then we tend to create a situation for. But I ended up just in those, going through really just so much trauma and so much brain trauma, and just not functioning, being able to function the same way, and knowing that you're not functioning properly, and then you're getting judgment from people, because people don't know what's wrong with you because you look fine. Well, you sort of look fine, so you're not bleeding, or they don't know. And I remember just bawling my eyes out after getting a concussion because my daughter had had one, and she was in a room for 2 weeks in the dark. I had no idea. I had no compassion to the level that I should have had for her because I had no idea what she was dealing with.
Wow.
That is a scary place to be because you're not the same. Your brain is not, it's, and then you get more traumas on top of that. Like it's such important work what you're sharing, because we need to listen. We just need to be heard.
We all need to be heard. Absolutely. That's almost one of the most fundamental mechanisms of growth from the time you're born, really. I mean, a child who cries needs to be heard. They need to be responded to. They can't be ignored, or they get into all kinds of trouble. It's just, that's a fundamental mechanism of growth of being a human being, is to be heard.
Yeah.
Absolutely it is. And being heard, then you actually get to know yourself. Actually, that's one of the best ways to know yourself. And that's how a child knows themselves, is that they're heard. And the child will say, Mother, I was at the playground today and I scraped my knees and I feel terrible.
Yeah.
If you say, gosh, it must hurt your knees, and if you hear them and repeat what they're saying, they then know themselves. If you say, oh, don't be silly, don't pay, be a good grown up, young woman, and don't pay attention.
Yeah, suck it up. That didn't hurt. Get up, get going. Like,
and then they will think, well, they shouldn't feel their own hurts.
And that you're teaching them no compassion. And when you have no compassion for yourself, you have no compassion for others. Hence the world we're living in. I think we're all just.
That's exact. I have a little say, if you don't love yourself, you'll not feel okay inside. You'll criticize others.
And when you're criticizing somebody else, you think that you're giving it to them, but you're the one holding it. You're holding the main energy of that, to spew that to somebody, to keep that judgment, to hurt them. Like, oh my goodness, you're destroying yourself first of all, right? Like, let it go. Is it really worth killing yourself over? Because that's what we're doing. That's so powerful, all of that.
That's true. I like everything worth having cost something, and the price of true love is self-knowledge.
Wow. Are you reading from your book right now?
I was reading some of the quotes from my book. Yeah.
Let's talk about your book. So
here's my book.
I love it. I love the title is so great. I love the colors of it. I think it's fabulous. What is it about? What is the journey?
Journey to Safe Harbour, memoir of 3 generations, self-love, forgiveness, reconnection. And
nice.
On the cover is a harbor, and it actually is a photograph of Tenants Harbor, Maine, where many generations of my family lived. And so it is a safe harbor. It's a lovely safe harbor up in Maine. At the same time, it's a metaphor for the safe harbor in yourself, which then becomes an anchor for your own family. That if you are in this place of being peaceful, can find this place of peace and joy and serenity in yourself, then your whole family feels safe and feels secure and feels seen and soothed by you. You really become the anchor for the family, for your children, for your husband, for whoever is in your life, your friends.
It's incredible. That's a huge thing to have, knowing that the moms that we are that. And if we're not healed, if we're not doing well, nobody's doing well. And it's yeah. So 3 generations. So were you seeing the patterns of behavioral stuff that was being passed down? Is that kind of the 3 generations back that you did?
I think all of us are partly a product of what's come before us, the generations before us.
Right.
So to go back and understand and look at the generations before us is one way to begin to get some insight into who you are, how you were parented, and if you have you're totally unself-conscious, how you're parenting, what you're doing. And in my particular case, my ancestors were shipbuilders up in this little town of Maine. And back in 1870, the wooden shipbuilding industry went bankrupt, and they lost their whole way of life. Now this is true of all the little towns in Maine, because there was the new technology, the train came, the steam came, and what they based their whole life on was gone. But what I'm interested in is the human story. So what did this do to this family? Well, the father began to drink because he had no idea what else to do with his life. And his oldest daughter decided to leave and became a missionary in India for 30 years. So you can sort of follow. So it's interesting to see, well, okay, I know why my grandmother went off to India for 30 years. There was nothing really left in this little town for her. And then in India, she married a man, and she herself, where they put the mission before the well-being of their children.
Ooh.
So I have let me put it differently. I'm not here to judge what the missionaries did. I don't know how many hearts they touched. I don't know how many people they brought great joy to. I don't want to talk about that because I don't have any answer. But I just know that they chose, like there's a story of Cedric, and Cedric was their firstborn son, and he wasn't learning to talk. And a district doctor came and told them that that they could take their son to England, and there was a doctor there who might be able to help that child. But at the same time, there was a great famine in India where they were. And so they chose to give the money to the local Indians and not give the medical care to their son.
Whoa. That's a whole other way of thinking, but it's not right or wrong. It's just, but that's
I don't really, it's just, I have no judgment. It just was.
Yeah.
But the result was he never learned to talk. And there are many stories coming out of India. They had 5 children. Anyway, 3 of the sons they lose. And one child at age 29 of this beautiful young man commits suicide. So then for my mother, who was the youngest of this family, the only girl, she tried to escape everything. She came to America, never talked about the missionaries, never talked about the suicide. It was all too painful, and tried to make a whole nother life that was separate from what she had experienced in India. But
do you blame her? When you don't have the tools, I get that, right?
You don't have the tools. She loved us all. She did the best she could, but she kind of repeated which is what we all do. You kind of repeat what's been done to you. And so she married a man very much like my grandfather, who was very interested in public service, but not very interested in his own children. And so I came from a family, again, of very depressed children.
Yeah.
And you just say, well, how can I break this? How can I do? I was a young mother. As I told you, I was a young widow. How can I do differently by my children? I don't want to end up with a very depressed son. I want them to thrive. So I need to do something differently. And so this book sort of is like a V. It goes down to this terrible suicide, and then it goes back up through all the mountains I had to climb to finally find a different kind of life.
Yeah, because we're broadcasting that when we're having these thoughts of whatever's happening in our life, if it's sad all the time, then our broadcast, our radio station that we're broadcasting is sad. And then we've got more of that coming to us from the law of attraction. And half the time we're just not even aware that that's what's happening. And the other thing I love that you were sharing is ask and it is given. Who knew? It actually is a thing. I swear. And now I ask all the time. And my favorite Christmas movie is Miracle on 34th Street, right? If you believe, you receive. And at the end, she's like, she believed, and Santa Claus, won the court case. I don't know if you watch it, but it's my favorite Christmas. And it is so all about that. If you can see it, you can feel it, and you believe it, it's already yours.
Well,
But
this is also a spiritual biography.
yes, getting that.
I have to tell you, I didn't understand it until I was at seminary, trying to heal from grief of the loss of my first husband. But one day, and I was very upset. I felt very much alone and very much abandoned as a young widow, and in deep grief. And I went one day. I used to go to chapel every day, and I went to the chapel on Good Friday, where the sermon was about Christ on the cross, and my God, why have you forsaken me? Is one of the things Christ says on the cross. And I listened to this, and I came out of this little chapel, and this great preacher, James Forbes, tapped me on my shoulder, and he said to me, "You know what they're talking about in there, but you can take no pride in it because it's been too hard on you. But you know what a lot of people would like to know, but you know." And all of a sudden, he had seen me. That's what, see, we're talking about being seen. He had seen me in a way I hadn't seen myself. It didn't occur to me when I was listening to this sermon that that's how I felt, abandoned, just like, that's actually how I felt. And this great pastor, and he was a great pastor because he could see people. And so he saw me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "That's who you are. You feel an abandoned woman." And I was so shocked. I just ran. I was just in a daze. I ran down to a little chapel that's in the basement of this seminary and laid on the floor and just was trying to cope. And all of a sudden, I wasn't alone anymore. I was not alone. And I was with a presence.
You're going to make me cry.
I was with a presence that knew me, that understood me, and that healed me. That when you're a widow, my experience was that my heart was torn in half. But all of a sudden, I wasn't alone anymore. I was with someone who saw me, which is pure love, unconditional love. I was totally accepted. There wasn't any like, well, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. It was just total knowing, total acceptance, total presence. And that, I was a changed woman after that. I can't, and I spent a lot of time then trying to explain what had happened to me. And I read a lot of books about it. And mystical experience is where you have an experience that changes your life. You can't explain it. You can't repeat it. You can't make it come. But you know it's real because it's so powerful. And after that, I went around smiling everywhere, and everyone said, "What had happened to you, Betsy?" But I had experienced unconditional love. And that's what we're all trying to learn in our own. All of us are lesser spirits, and none of us will get there, of course. But that kind of total knowing, total acceptance, total seeing, it changes you forever.
Yeah.
That's what all children need. They need this unconditional love. Darling, I love you no matter what you've done, how you look, what are you saying. You have my unconditional acceptance and love. And I see you, and I see who you are, and I'm here for you. I soothe you. You're safe with me.
I got you. I always tell my little 4-year-old, we adopted my little grandbaby. She was 3 months at the time. And I always would hold her. We'd give these heart-to-heart hugs, and we healed each other for sure. But I would always say to her, "I got you. I got you." And I still always say that. And as soon as I say that to her, she just you can just feel everything melt. You're
the anchor for that little girl.
Yeah, I think she's mine as well.
totally safe, totally secure, totally soothed and seen and accepted.
And beautiful and funny and smart and all of like right?
Everything.
It just yeah. And when she's doing, having some behavior that where I'm trying to say, that's not really acceptable. Mommy, do you still love me? Do you still love me? I'm like, of course I love you. I love you to the moon and back, and you can do all of those things all the time. And I'm still gonna love you more and more and more. Mommy, you are so beautiful. I'm like, okay, now we're besties. She says it to everybody, right? She'll say, you are so beautiful. But she's from the heart. She'll look at you and you can feel it, and she will turn people's day right around because she's just she's a light and she's love and she
Isn't that
comes from the
wonderful?
heart.
What a
It's
wonderful story. But you see, what you're saying and what I'm saying with my mystical experience is that the Holy Spirit met me where I needed it. In this particular instance, I was a recent widow, and the Holy Spirit filled my heart, healed me. But the Holy Spirit comes to you and your little girl because the mother and the child. It's where it
yeah.
it's the great miracle, mystery. I can't really explain it. I just say it's there. My experience
Yes.
is there, and I'm not alone in this world.
Yeah. You know what, I'm going through that same journey myself, and abandonment was my big issue, and all of those things. But you have to come to the awareness that is still kind of in there on that little girl, and it's just such a big onion to peel. Sometimes you think, I've got now I got it right, got that now, right? Moving past that, then all of a sudden stumbling back on that situation again. But it's on a deeper, more intense web to unweave,
The
right?
journey is longer and harder than our minds think it should be. We all think, okay, I've done that, let's go on. But no, it's still there. But, I was very interested. I took a course not long ago on the Odyssey, and the professor said that you can interpret that poem as the journey home. So that all of those adventures and crazy things that Odysseus meets along the way, you could say are psychological metaphors for this coming to terms with his own inner self so he could come home. So from the earliest of times, I think that's maybe one of our earliest pieces of literature that's come down to us.
Yeah.
This has been mankind has known this is their journey.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy one, but everyone says, and I do too, because now I've experienced it, it's so worthwhile because
Yeah.
because you finally get to a place where you know that you're transformed.
Yeah. And so I'm coming through and having those experiences now, which I just wasn't finding them for a long time. Is that something that grows just with practice of giving that space and that intention and that focus of what do I want? What do I want today? And filling ourselves first. So I've been on that, and I do see, again, the big ball starts to roll in a positive upward direction, that it becomes more natural than having to think about it and intend it every day right?
I think that's right.
Is that something that just kind of naturally the space just grows? Did you find, or was it kind of just like a whole big space being it?
I think I've spent, I'm, probably in the last decade or two of my life.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? Maybe we all are.
We do not know. We do not know when our day is coming. That is for sure. But for most of my life, I was wondering, what should I be doing? What do I need to do? And it's somehow come together for me. But I think I do think it starts with faith. I do believe there's a path for me. I just have to find it.
I do too. And like I said, I didn't have any faith, and I wasn't interested in and didn't really understand any of that. And of course, then when you're not brought up, and I was ignorant to all of the religions. I didn't know anything about any of it, but I was seeing spirit, and I was having to deal with the fear and the what's happening in my life as a small child that nobody else was seeing. So that fear. And so I would put myself to bed with mantras of where there is love, there is no fear. Like I would, listen, like just constant the lights on.
From the time you've been a little tiny girl.
Yeah, I was probably like 4, and my mom came home. She had died apparently, and then she came home months later, and there was three spirits above her bed and spoke to me, and that was angelic. Like it was, I was, yeah, like it's like I could see it as clear as day for my whole life. It was, yeah, but I kind of shut that down because I didn't understand it. Nobody else was experiencing it. And, even to date, right, I have lots of people, oh yeah, well, that's crazy, or she's making that up, or
That is so powerful what you just said. And it's so profound that you had this experience as a little girl.
yeah.
That experience can probably keep teaching you. And if you
Oh,
dwell on it, if you think about it, when you're quiet, just sort of reimagine that scene, it will feed your soul. That's lovely.
yeah. So I've kind of been on this whole journey and quest for most of my life, but I get going and I get rolling, and I'm, reading and really enjoying it, and learning. And I love everything to do with all of the religions and the knowledge and the wisdom and the quantum field. And I am just this addict for what, you went to school. It's just so interesting. How can anybody not want to know about that?
I agree with that. And I actually went to a second seminary because I'm so interested. The One Spirit Seminary in New York City, which which you get a chance to read the rituals and the scriptures of all the great world religions. And I
It's
found
powerful.
that there are many paths to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Christian. That's the way I was brought up. That's what that's what my parents are. That's my tradition. But I'm still open to the traditions and the rituals of all the other great religions, because I think they have a lot to teach us about this path to the Holy Spirit.
Right. And so why is everybody like, so that was the one thing that really turned me off of wanting to go, was the fact that I did put my daughter in Christian private school, and she wanted to go, and I thought, well, geez, that's a great, safe place. It was horrible, horrible, horrible experience, because there's so many not knowing really, and learning, going to all these classes and learning, and then having the interaction of people that are in there because they're supposed to be there, but they're not there for the right reasons. And then that's where that comes in, I believe, right? Because it's not, they're not in touch, they're not having a relationship. Whereas here I don't know anything about it, but I knew I can connect and I have a relationship. And asking, the last 4 years asking, you receive like that. It's like there's nothing better. There's no drink, smoking, ayahuasca, whatever. There's nothing that touches that space that, like you're talking about. It's just, and then that expansion inside of it, it's just something else. Yeah, it's just, you want everybody to understand that, because that is our gift from God. I believe that we're here to, we're supposed to be teaching and knowing that we have that to connect with, the divine, right? All of us.
That's
It's
right.
incredible. And
That's
yeah,
right.
I can't not do it. Every day I meditate, every day I work. It's just, and thinking my whole life that I wasn't interested in any of that, right? I thought it was kind of goofy or whatever the story was that I was telling myself was too cool to go or something, right? That, I still have lots of friends that would, they think, oh, there's Jackie talking that stuff again, but it's way bigger than us. We're just these little specks in the middle of this multi-faceted universe. And like, how can we not be connected to something that's driving the whole thing? Of course we are.
I think that's well said, Jackie.
Thank you.
But the other side, I think of it is, if we ever get to the point that we think we have the whole truth and nobody does, then we know by definition we're wrong, because we're all just human beings.
That's just ego. Now you've just dropped everything that you just gave space for, and now you're just right back in the ego. You're just back at the bottom of the barrel again. Right?
That's right. That's right.
It is. I remember having one of my older sisters. Was very much into the healing and stuff, and I remember, I've done all the work now, and I thought, oh Lordy, right now you've started again, but we just don't know, right? I the same thing. I think, okay, well, I've done that, and then you have this huge you come up off the ground, and then there's this huge expansion of amazing life that you get from being and doing the work and the lessons there. But I really truly thought that, I'd learned everything. So it's kind of shocking and shitty when you find out that you haven't. And you're like, okay, what do I need to learn here? Like, what is it that I'm not seeing? How can I perceive this different?
That's exactly my experience. After seminary, I thought, okay, I'm healed now. And then it was such a shock to me that I had another mountain to climb. I thought, oh my goodness. But it's sort of like you climb a mountain, and then you look around and you think, oh my goodness, there's another one. And maybe that goes on our whole life. And maybe that's good, that our life, as long as we're alive, there are going to be new challenges for us too.
Yeah, because we have to expand, right? If we're not growing, we're dying. So yeah, to me, that's okay. It's just, and I know it hasn't killed me yet. It should have by now. We must be here for a big purpose, I believe. Right? Those big mountains are given to the ones that have lots of, to be out there and sharing that this is a thing, and we all have this to tap into, and it's easy to tap into. It's in your heart, and it's in the amygdala, is what you were saying, right? Mm-hmm. We have the pineal, that in the pineal gland, and that you get that little pine cone that's in there, and you get that activated, and it's a full drugstore that's in our body to heal ourselves, but we haven't activated it because nobody knows we have it. Like, it's incredible, the ignorance that we are still living in after all of these years and these teachings, and maybe because we do tap in with the divine, right? You do have that feeling of, and everything's in flow. You're floating on the river, and everything's connecting, right? Your day is just fun and exciting, and it goes your way, and what you intend. Oh, look at that, and here's that. I was just thinking about that, and answers are there. It's so much fun, and yeah. But the days that you're not there,
you'll be interested to know,
yes,
that there's now a lot of research going on about spirituality and psychology. And there's I haven't met her, but I've read her books. There's a Dr. Lisa Miller, who has started a department at Columbia Teachers College on spirituality and psychology. And she's very concerned about the mental health crisis among college students in this country. There's so many suicides, there's so much drug use, there's so much depression. And so she has found just what we're talking about, that through brain scans, she's found that those college students, teenagers who developed a sense of spirituality, actually you could see a thicker part of the brain, she says, than those who have not developed that. And she said that those who've developed this sense of spirituality have more resources, more resilience within themselves to handle the many stresses they go through in college now. It's really quite extraordinary.
I love all that stuff. And Joe Dispenza, I did some of his work and some courses, and he's teaching all about the brain and how it works and how to get the energy centers up. I just realized that I have a low battery. I don't want to lose you at the end of this podcast. But I had a little bit of a disaster starting. The dog went through, and the cords aren't plugged in. So I would love to just to wrap up, is there some last comments that I'm going to make sure all your information is posted, and how people can get some coaching or get your book, or what the name, all of that I'll put with your with our video.
I actually have a website, journeytosafeharbor.com, which talks a lot about my coaching, and I think it's on there now. I'm going to have a little free ebook about reconnecting the family, and then my book, and coaching courses, and I'd be glad to talk to people.
Yeah.
So, but I guess the thing I want to wrap up with is just the faith that there's an answer. That if you just seek, you will find. That is the great promise, and the great joy of my life is that it's been true. That as I've seriously sought, I have found answers, and this tremendous healing that's come into my life, I'm just so grateful for. And I think it's open to us all. It is open to us all.
It is. If it was open to me, it's open to everybody. I was on my knees. I was on my knees asking, and I received, and it's a thing. It's actually a thing. It's quite powerful, but you have to ask because we have free will.
Jackie, it's really been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Your story is wonderful, and I am going to read that book. I think it's got a lot of stuff in there for me. So,
and I'd love to hear from you. I love to, people who read my book, I love to hear from them. If you go on my website, Journey to Safe Harbor, there's a place at the back where you can just contact me, Reverend Betsy at journeytosafeharbor.com, and I'll get it.
You're a gift. You're a gift. Thank you so much for spending this time with me.
I loved it.
Really
Jackie.
appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, we'll catch up. We'll see each other soon.
I hope so. I look forward to having another visit someday.
Okay, me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, bye.
Bye.